Um, I'm gonna introduce Dr. Alan Jacobson. He's a clinical psychologist. He's been working with families, and he's the CEO of the Italian Home for Children for over 20 years of experience. He's also, I feel very lucky, our lead investor on wefunder. It's very hard to find investors that are aligned to our vision of creating healthy social media. And I'm very excited to have him join us and share his experience. Getting access to quality mental health, especially in the United States, isn't an easy task. And I'm hoping he can share a lot of his experience with us. So hi, Alan. Thanks for joining. You're still muted. Wait, I'll unmute you. You can you unmute yourself or are you able to? Oh, great.
Here we go.
Able to unmute yourself. So welcome.
Thanks.
I think what I really wanted to start with is if you can tell us a bit about the problems you've been encountering with families and kids since COVID. There's a lot going on there, and I think I'd be very curious to hear.
Yeah, I mean, the timing of what you all are doing with your technology couldn't be better. What we're seeing is people are feeling more and more disconnected from each other, from the world, from their loved ones. And a lot of people would tell you, and a lot of research has been done, that the core of depression is often a sense of disconnectedness. And it's no surprise that we're seeing the incidence of people reporting depression is actually up 300% right now from where we were a year ago right now. And there's no surprise there. People are, that sense of disconnection is severe and really having terrible consequences. It's worse for kids, partially because we as adults can kind of process this and know that, you know, hopefully it will end and hopefully it will end soon. For kids who don't process time the way we do, there's a lot more uncertainty. They feel like their whole world has changed, and that this sense of disconnection, is sort of a new reality for them, and it's hitting them really hard.
Yeah, I'm personally very worried about. I have a kid brother and also a nephew, and they're doing two different things. Like my kid brother's in this totally virtual school, and my nephew's in a type of real school, but they have these boundaries around them. I don't know if you've seen that, but just like plastic covers and all these limitations and wearing masks. And I don't even know what is healthier. And actually, my family's been trying to consult with me on this, and I'd love your opinion. Like, what would you or what are you recommending to families with kids to do right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally telling people to, you know, if your technology was more widely available, I'd be pointing them to it. And I already do talk, actually, I do talk up what you're doing, because there was actually, this was sort of interesting. There was a study done that said that in any given day at school, a kid has about 1,000 interactions, social interactions. And that could be everything from with the teacher to another child to just smiling at someone in the corridor, to, you know, saying thank you in the lunch line. But they have about 1,000 touch points in any given day when they're physically at school. With Zoom and with remote learning and with learning where they have to go into the classroom, as you said, like into a box, and they can't, you know, they don't have lunch and they don't have all these things. We've cut that down to about 200. We've cut that down significantly. And so even though kids are still getting an education and you know, we're yet to see whether that education, you know, is how that kind of holds up. We certainly know that kids just aren't getting that social interaction. They're not getting those important touch points. It's very, very concerning to me. And now that we're going into the second year of that, or at least the second school year, it's very concerning.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips generally about like how can I help support my brother?
Yeah.
What can families be doing?
Yeah, I started to say that at the beginning. But technology is key.
Technology.
But knowing where to go with the technology is so important. Social media can really backfire. Social media is not necessarily a good way for kids to be social and to get social support. In fact, it can be a really bad way to get social support because of the bullying and kind of, all sorts of nonsense that can go on with social media that parents may not be aware of. But technologies like virtual reality, technologies like teachers creatively using Zoom, having the kids do something in 3 dimensions instead of 2 dimensions on Zoom. These are the kinds of things that I tell parents to do. I actually think that the longer this goes on, I think the more we're going to see technology like VR come into education, because the 2 dimensions are going to really fall short. High school kids trying to learn, chemistry or trying to do ceramics or that kind of thing. These can't be done in 2 dimensions, and certainly the social aspects of being in 2 dimensions aren't great either. So I've been talking up a lot of different kind of technological interventions.
Yeah, maybe I can just mention a few that aren't just us. I do think that
Please.
Miu is really a great interactive tool for physical play and creating these pro-social interactions. And we have just launched an iPad version because a lot of these schools are giving out iPads for the kids. And I want to be able to play with my brother. So we just actually launched on the store yesterday an iPad version. But things like Mozilla Hubs, I would highly recommend for school teachers to even use, because you can bring in a board, bring in a screen, and you don't need to have VR to interact. You can have little characters in there that still wander around the world, allowing you to gamify the interaction. So it's not just a 2D Zoom, and you could still bring in actual knowledge. It's also free. It's Mozilla's very, when it comes to these big companies, very aligned to like open source and well-being of its users. I think they have some limitations around size. I think you can only have like 12 or 15 people in the same world at the same time. And what's nice about it is, again, if you have VR, you can actually be immersed in it, but if not, you can just be on a desktop still interacting. So if there's any teachers listening, I would highly recommend checking out Mozilla Hubs too. I'm also curious, we talked about kids, but what's happening to the older generation, our grandparents, which are, the ones that are actually at the higher health risk for COVID. But then there's the loneliness, right? Like, what's worse for them?
Yeah. It's been really, so what's interesting about this is we were already seeing, well before COVID, we were seeing an increase in depression and anxiety among the elderly. And part of that is because technology was kind of leaving them behind, and people weren't taking the time. The younger generations are using technology to stay close, but they're leaving out the older generation in that. So we were already seeing a pretty significant increase in depression and anxiety, and this has made it so much worse because there's such a sense of isolation among the elderly, and this has greatly magnified it. I'm worried about the fact that we're going into the colder months in a lot of the country, and that's going to make it even worse. People won't be taking walks or even getting out as much. But it's a significant concern, and if I could wave a magic wand, I would somehow make it so that the older folks used VR and got comfortable with it and those kind of technologies, because I'm worried it's going to kind of leave them behind.
Yeah, that's also a thing I think about a lot, because I do see this as an amazing tool. How cool would it be if the younger generation would now blow kisses at their grandparents to help them feel less lonely and just know that we still love them, even though we're afraid. We don't, a lot of my friends are putting higher boundaries than their grandparents because they're afraid to kill their grandparents. We're just living in such a crazy situation. So do you have any tips about like how to bridge that gap of communication? Like it's just difficult enough for me to explain to my granddad how to use Zoom.
Yeah.
If you have any tips for that.
Yeah, you know what? There's a few resources that people can use. So a lot of the local council on aging, you almost many towns and cities have a council on aging.
Okay.
They almost always universally have an expert that is kind of very good with helping older folks with technologies that they may not be familiar with. So people should, the kids can get in touch with the local council on aging wherever their parents might live, or the parents can get in touch themselves. I
Or
also
even
think,
companies like I will do this right afterwards to see if there's a way for us to yeah, thanks for that.
I was actually going to say that,
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more that technology companies are going out of their way, both to make it relatively easy or, easier. And like you said, Sarah, that's terrific, is reaching out and making that, that age group a priority, because we have to remember, a lot of us grew up, and all of these technologies kind of existed. But as you said, for someone who's in an older generation to see in 3 dimensions their grandchild, blow them a kiss or do a special dance for them, it blows them away. I mean, it's so wonderful. It's like it's like the best medicine they could take.
Yeah, I remember a very funny story a long time ago. A grandfather of a friend of mine was introduced to GPS for the first time, and he was just like, "This is a miracle. This is like proof of miracles." Because
Exactly.
for us, yeah, we grew up with this technology, but somebody who hasn't, it's just there's a big bridge that we can try to sort of close that gap.
Yeah.
So you started also to mention about the dangers of our social media currently, and I don't know, maybe the viewers that are with us have watched the Social Dilemma on Netflix lately. Maybe they have their own concerns. And by the way, this is also an open communication, so if you have any questions for Alan, it doesn't just need to be me. Feel free to write them in the chat, and we'll communicate them to Alan. But I was wondering, like, have you, in your history, seen cases of anorexia and dysmorphia that you, from your experience, directly connect to use of social media?
Absolutely, and it's very worrisome. And I've seen it on 3 different levels. Actually, it's such a good question. The first level is that a lot of social media, Snapchat and some of the others, it's very visual, and it's very much about your reaction and how you look when you're making your reaction. And TikTok is all about making a video, and oftentimes it's dancing and running around or whatever. So people are feeling like they need to be even more visible, and people that have worries about their appearance and their body, that just completely magnifies that. There's no kind of hiding from that. The other thing that social media doesn't tend to be very both sympathetic or understanding. And unfortunately, unless people make their ways to the right groups that are run by professionals, or at least people that really understand a problem like anorexia, social media, it can be cruel. But even if it's not cruel, it's not understanding and doesn't understand these things, and people can get very bad advice from social media. Why don't you just eat? Or no, you're really skinny. I mean, all of the things that we tell people not to do in real life happen in social media. And my advice to people is, if you want to go on social media to get support for something, make sure you're going to the right place, because like I said, even if it's not cruel, it's not, it can be very
lacking in knowledge and yeah,
exactly.
flattening the human experience.
Exactly. People think they're helping, and unfortunately they're truly not.
Yeah. Do you have any advice? I know it's like I, I see this as a type of two-pronged problem. Parents are dealing with their kids being addicted to social media, but they're actually addicted to it too,
Right.
right? So it's a bit like, oh, we're gonna put limitations on kids, but we're not really leading by example in
Right.
many situations. So do you have any advice for families around how to create a stronger family connection um, instead of constantly going to social media?
And you actually just said something very insightful is I have seen more and more parents who this isn't something where they sit at the dinner table and say to their kids, now you are going to be restricted from social media. Instead, it can be a family conversation. I mean, it can be, look, we're going to let's all cut back on social media. There's just a lot of reasons why it's doing none of us any good. So let's all make a goal of being on social media less. And it's kind of the new, you know, parents often do that with kind of dietary stuff. Hey, as a family, let's eat more healthy and let's have more vegetables. Well, now families can really get together and try to tackle this issue together, because you're very, very right about that. The specific advice I give to parents is that they really, absent being able to force their child to cut back on the social media, what they really want to make sure they're doing is seeing signs that that social media is having a significant effect. They need to watch for signs of depression. They need to watch for signs of anxiety, anorexia, you know, whatever else may be, you know, the effects of bullying. Parents need to make themselves aware of how this looks when the child is having a real problem on social media, so that they can recognize it.
Can you give us a few things to like
Yeah.
signs? Yeah.
Yeah. So what I say to parents, I mean, you know, people perceive their kids as changing a lot as they grow up, but actually the underlying kid that was age 6, 7, or 8 is kind of that same kid. You know, a lot major things actually don't change. So if there's a child who used to be very social and used to have a lot of friends, and now they don't have any friends and seem to hang out at home a lot more than they used to, well, pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Changes in appetite that aren't on purpose. You know, they're eating more, they're eating a lot more, they're eating a lot less. Changes in sleep patterns, not being able to fall asleep, or waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning and not being able to go back to bed. And really any change in kind of the underlying mood, or you know, the temperament of the child, that can change a lot. I mean, when a kid becomes a teenager, there can be a lot of hormones and there can be moodiness. But if you're, as a parent, on a gut level, feel like your child just isn't the same child as they were a year or two ago, it's something to really worry about. And right now that our kids are kind of stuck at home, social media can be really one of the main culprits of that.
And except for seeking expert advice and mental health expertise, are there other things you would recommend for parents to do when they encounter these signs?
Yeah. So, and by the way, so that's the other thing that we're seeing now, which is concerning, is that oftentimes the parent may miss something, but the pediatrician or the teacher or the coach or the, you know, the big brother figure in the neighborhood, you know, that someone else might pick up on. And now that the kids aren't around those people, if the parents miss it, it might get missed. So parents need to be even more vigilant about this right now. And the suggestion I would make is, make sure you give the child a chance to kind of express things on their own terms. Don't force it. You know, if they don't feel like talking that day, that's okay. But if you feel like you have an opening and your child seems to be in kind of a talkative mood or an open mood, you know, bring something up. Car rides are perfect for kids because they can face forward and you're facing forward. They don't have to make eye contact. It doesn't have to be that intensity. So I always say, you know, if you want to bring something up, maybe on a long car ride, you know, bring up the conversation. But the other thing I tell parents is, don't assume, out of a sense of pride, we like to think that we're the ones that our kids are going to go to if they have a problem. We need to stop assuming that. And kids may have a cousin or an uncle or an aunt or an older friend or just someone else who's an adult that they may feel more comfortable talking to. And if you can sort that out and know who that is, either bring that person into their life a little bit more, or even ask them if they wanted to talk to uncle, whatever. So we have to drop our pride a little bit and realize we may not be the perfect ones that our kids want to talk to all the time when we have troubles. And the third thing is, that with younger kids, we can kind of, with older kids, we can't do this, but with younger kids, we can play a few tricks. We can try to, set them up to be, on a play date with a different child than the one they're hanging around with that we're worried is causing, problems, or, have them join a group or a club or a
lot of these things are very limited now because of COVID, right?
That's the problem. Yeah.
We're losing a lot of these tools to change the environment you're in.
Very true. Very true.
But it's an interesting part about like letting go of your ego generally, not just as a parent, as a creator, as a person in the world, to let people see you, I think, maybe also as like a vulnerable creature. Maybe that can help create a bonding experience generally.
And it's interesting, Lily just made a very good comment, and it's important to say, the car ride idea, 75% of the time it works, but it can also backfire, and the child can kind of feel stuck in the car in an uncomfortable situation. So what I do tell parents is, be prepared to drop it. Be prepared to change the subject. These conversations have to feel comfortable. And if you start to feel like the child is tense or anxious, or, and there's just a discomfort in the air, car ride or not, don't push it, because that's, you'll have another chance. So that was a good question.
Yeah. Do you have any tips about communicating to children about COVID? Like you said, they don't have the same necessarily reality understanding. But in some ways, they're very, very, at least I remember myself as a kid being very, very attuned to the stress levels around me. So there are many kids really picking up that things are absolutely not okay, and how can we help them feel safe and cared for in this situation?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and parents are, obviously asking me that. That's probably the number one question I get. It's the thing we have to do with kids is we have to realize that they need to be reassured, and it almost has to border on a little bit of a white lie in telling them that, as long as we all follow precautions and we're aware of, this is the advice that people are giving us, that that people will be okay. Kids need to feel right now some sense of control. They need to feel, because a virus to them, well, to all of us, is so scary. And they need to feel, so if it's putting on a mask and social distancing, or staying in the house instead of going to the playground, helping kids realize that the precautions they're taking are going to keep them safe gives them a sense of control. The other thing we need to do with kids is, as we all know, this will end someday. We all hope it's much sooner than much later. But as I said before, kids sense of time, especially when they're little. Tomorrow, I mean, if you say next year to an 8-year-old, it's a decade to the rest of us. So kids really have to understand that this is going to end, that there's really smart people that are working on, this, and this will end, and we're all just hoping it ends sooner than later. But it can't feel like forever, and it can't feel like they have no control over it.
That's interesting. Are you seeing things more in the older ages, like teenagers that, would usually maybe start going to college right now, and everything's just in limbo for them? I remember that time in my life was like, wow, super exciting. And, what's going on with that age group?
Such an interesting question too, because what we're seeing, and it's not quite as simple as, I'm going to oversimplify a little bit, but we're seeing that younger kids up through about when adolescence starts, the main symptom of all of this is anxiety, the uncertainty, the invisible threat of a virus. You know, it's anxiety. But with teenagers and young adults, it's kind of flipping to depression. It's less about anxiety. In fact, some college-age kids don't have enough anxiety about this. But we are seeing it switch to depression because a lot of their life goals and a lot of what they've been working toward is now flipped upside down.
Yeah. Is there some advice you can give, you know, teenagers might be watching us now, or their parents, to like, what can you do when you have so little control, actually?
And that's exactly, you know, the best advice I can give people is be aware of what you have control over. Take control over what you have control over. And for the stuff you don't have control over, if you find yourself having repeated thoughts about it, you know, one time having a thought you have you don't have any control over is okay. The 10th or 20th time that you have that thought over the thing you have no control over, it's going to start making you depressed or making you anxious. So they really need to, you know, I've even had kids in my practice make a list. Here's what I still have control over. Here's what I don't. And they feel really good about doing the stuff that they actually, you know, actually can make a difference for them.
Yeah, I think that can be helpful, even for me. For me, I'll share, like, my work has been, you know, this thing that I do have control over, like, can I keep producing the things that I want in the world? No, I can't really. A big part of my work used to be going and demoing in live events. And it's the thing I love most, is seeing people and these experiences I create and seeing how their bodies react, and the joy and this social connection that forms afterwards, and all that's coming back sometime maybe, but definitely it's been just like letting go of that as a recharge, and finding what I can still recharge from, and trying to create online events, trying to experiment with technology, and trying to stay, I think, creative and productive, but also forgiving myself on some days that I'm not able to do that, because I think there's also maybe more for us working people, that when the stress and anxiety do become very strong, it's also okay to be like, I need a mental health day, to just vegetate in front of Netflix or sit outside and read a book, without the like self-flagellation that at least I have a lot of. So maybe if you have any tips about like that would be great for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, where we all need to find that balance. And, you know, it's right now it's all about, for a lot of people, finding new ways to relax and new hobbies and new ways to relate and kind of be social with other people. And one interesting thing I'm seeing happen and people are regretful of is the people that back in March or April or May felt like, well, this is going to end so soon, I'm not going to make any major changes in what I'm doing. You know, I can't go to the gym now, but I won't worry about it because I'll be able to go to the gym soon. People are kind of regretting the fact that they put off some of these changes. And you know, well, we'd all like to think that this will all go back to normal sometime this winter or early next spring. We don't know. And at this point, I think we all have to just make some of these decisions about how we're going to live this life. Well, we can still hope it's going to end soon. Putting off some of those changes, you mentioned, you know, what you're doing instead of doing some of those live demos. That's important for us to do. It's important for us to make that switch and not just wait for everything to come back to normal.
Yeah, I like that. That's also very related to, you know, the topic of building resilience, because so much has been taken away from us that we really need to be proactive on this. And I like the idea of, like, you know, making a list of new things you want to explore as a recharge. And I know there's been a lot of more like things that I think are very healthy, like, you know, cooking more, and learning how to use an oven for me, or um, just exploring a new hobby, and taking the time to try to make the most out of this weird, very, very strange situation that
Yeah.
I don't think anybody was predicting we'd be in. Can you share a bit more about like how your practices are actually taking place? Have you moved everything to Zoom? Are you meeting people outside? How does that work?
Yeah, I'm doing things completely on Zoom. But one of the reasons I can do that is because I used to see all ages. I pretty much only see kind of high school age and above now. A lot of my colleagues that are seeing kids, at least while it was warm in New England where we are, did do outside stuff and did, they'd sit at a picnic table, or and I think that's actually as much as possible important. With the younger the child is, the more important that is. But yeah, I'm completely on Zoom, but it works okay, but there is something lacking, the relationship that you can build with clients, and just it's not the same in 2 dimensions as it is in 3 dimensions, but it's kind of where we are.
Yeah, preaching to the choir, but maybe I would be happy to share a bit of why the theory from cognitive neuroscience, why that is. We have a mirror system in our brain that is really mimicking each other's bodies, and we don't get that as much when we are on 2D screens. So we're literally losing the bandwidth of data that's being communicated between us. You can put your hand to the screen and we can fake high five, but I don't get that depth perception of where you actually are, and that's activating less of my brain. So we are really not communicating at that same high bandwidth that we do get when we are in the same space.
Yeah.
And that's why I've been super fascinated with VR and AR, because we can start to bridge those gaps. We're pretty far still, but I can start giving the depth perception and the high five that actually vibrates, so you feel that the other person is there, and you can start playing with these things.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't have much time left, so I would love to open this to people. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Comments, anything at all? Now's the time. And I'm gonna check if people have commented on the Facebook event, because I also ask people to leave comments or ask questions if they want to. No questions here. Let's see. Okay, so we're not, no questions. Would you like to end with some note or any comments from you?
Sure. I mean, there's one thing that, Sarah, you said the word resilience, and one of the things I like to do with my clients is help people see that in almost any situation, it's possible to see the positive. It doesn't mean we have to ignore the negative, but it's possible to see the positive. And we could have a generation of kids right now who's extremely resilient and able to go through a lot of challenges and be successful, because if we successfully teach kids how to get through this and how to get through this and still achieve their goals and still, do what they want to do with their life. And we may, instead of having a generation, I hear the negatives of, we're going to have this generation that can't relate socially and blah, 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 and, isn't as educated. I actually think we could have a generation of kids who's extremely resilient and confident in their ability to get through significant challenges. So, I encourage parents to also look up some of the resiliency research, and some of it's written directly for parents. And this can be an opportunity, and even though it's a really difficult situation.
So do you have we have a question from iPhone. Do you have tips about building resilience in ourselves before we come to the kids?
Absolutely. So what one of the keys to building resilience is realizing, is kind of giving ourselves credit, is realizing how many challenges we go through on a daily, a monthly, a yearly basis. We often try to sum things up in these major life events, these major losses and these major challenges. What I encourage people to do is to kind of look at the smaller stuff. Any one of us has gone through, we go through hundreds of challenges a year, and we get through it because we're strong and we're confident and we're smart enough to figure out a way. So the first thing is give yourself credit. Realize how many times you've been faced with a challenge and you've come through it, and concentrate on that. My clients who are most resilient are the ones that have just as easy a time telling me about their successes and how they overcame a challenge as they do saying what went wrong. But when I have clients come into my office that can tell you all the things that aren't going right or went wrong, I worry about their resilience, because I'm not sure that they realize how many successes that they've had. That's the first thing. The other thing that builds resilience is being around other people and being around positive people that can build us up and are. I like to say that the best way we can make friends is to be friends with people who are opposites in some ways, the same in many ways, but the opposites in some ways. If you're not a confident person, it's great to have a confident friend. If you don't feel like you're a resilient person, it's great to have a resilient friend. So it's, seek out those people who you perceive have those qualities, and
so you can learn from them, right? You can start mimicking their patterns. Yeah. Right. I think it's very interesting because again, we're dealing with our brain's biases when it comes to resilience, and this like optimism versus pessimism, success versus failure. It is what bias, top-down belief do you have that is gonna shape how you perceive your current reality. And there are ways for us to practice this. If it's a gratitude journal, if it's messaging, creating a quarantine around you. That's been a term in my social groups. So even if I'm very lucky, I live in a community house. So social connections come built in, but many people are living alone. So creating a quarantine where you do daily check-ins or weekly check-ins that are really scheduled, and making the time for that, along with focusing. Yeah, for me, sometimes if I'm having a bad day, I'll just be like, well, I made breakfast today. Right. That's a great success. I successfully fed myself as a biological creature who has trouble eating under stress. So just focusing on really small achievements. You got through the day, and another thing I love doing is because the gratitude journaling for me is a bit too heavy on words, but I will collect little things from my day or take photos, and then have that as a visual representation of the things that I am grateful for, the things I succeeded in, the challenges that
That's a perfect example. Yeah. Someone asked a question about, so how do you use social media? I'll tell you the best advice I can give people about social media is use yourself as a barometer. And if you're on a certain platform and you just don't feel good during or after that, that 15 minutes or that half an hour or whatever, either that platform isn't for you, or you need to change how you're using it. And social media, if we do it right, should be a way that we get positives and positive support and hopefulness. And if that's not how you're feeling, something needs to change, and something needs to change until you're your own barometer and it feels good. I had someone, for example, who had was following a lot of different things on Twitter, and made the change to, she eliminated about half of them and added all the good news network. You know, she was following just about every good news kind of thing and happy videos, whatever. Now she loves Twitter. But she used herself as a barometer and didn't feel good after she was on it.
Cultivate your own reality. There are tools out there that both, for instance, I notice on myself, I might enjoy Facebook for 5 minutes, but then I just keep scrolling, and at the end of it, I feel depleted. So there are tools that can put time limitations on you, that can ping you when it's gone too much. And I'm gonna share in the chat a link that I just posted a very long Medium article about what we're doing as a company to make sure people's well-being is aligned to their use of this new platform that we're building. And parts of it are choices about avatars that let people explore their inner selves instead of being focused on being cute and sexy constantly. It's you know, explore your strangeness, explore the creativity and playfulness. And parts of it are about consent around advertisement and things that steal your attention on social media, that then, you know, don't read beauty magazines. They will only make you feel uglier. That is literally their business model. Make you feel bad so you buy things. And I think it's important to be aware of these things, that and try as much as we can. Like, I'm talking to friends that work on these platforms, they're awesome people, they're close friends, to change. I don't think it's impossible for these social media to find better alignment to us.
That's a really good, you know, you said something important in there, is that I do find that even the people that follow the advice that I have, it's easy to slip. It's easy to, as you said, to scroll when you wish you hadn't scrolled. So setting your own limits. The system is built
that way, right? The system is built in order to keep our eyeballs going, even beyond what we really want as full agents. And I'm very hoping that what we're building will be different, where people can really feel full agency and treat this as a tool to extend our capabilities. Because yes, social media can be a tool to find people that love the same things that you do, to connect to groups. You know, I remember as a kid that was into strange things like sci-fi. Lily here is my friend from high school, right? We were quite a minority, and with social media now, there's conferences and a community that's been built that connects people that do have the same hobbies, and that's amazing. And we should try to use that as a tool and not as an addictive thing that just keeps hijacking us.
Great point. Yep.
Okay, so I think with that, we'll end. I'm super, super grateful. I've learned at least three new things from this conversation that I will take action on. And I hope people that have been listening and asking questions have learned too.
Yeah. So, yeah. Thanks for having me. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.